All right, guys. Well, it is just 2 o'clock Eastern time, so I'm going to click down one and we are going to get the show started for part two of our demand generation webinar. So, the purpose of getting this panel together, and it's my pleasure to welcome Tom, Mark, and Dan to Lunch with Haley, is to talk about, are there opportunities to create demand for staffing services in a market like we're facing now, where it's really kind of tough to generate new business, kind of tough to win over clients from current vendors, and kind of tough to convince people they should be working with staffing services. So before we jump in to the presentation, we're actually going to go back, and this is our one slide recap of the May discussion. This was actually back in May, but this is what we were talking about, is just the roller coaster that the staffing industry has been on since about the 10th or 11th month of 2023. I would say it feels like we're on the first drop in the hill, but maybe we're in the upside down part of the loop-de-loop. I'm not sure where we are right now. It doesn't feel better. The industry is still down 20% over from its peak. We've lost 640,000 jobs, and the last quarter was down 10% again year over year. Just not a lot of fun to be in the staffing industry at a time where, according to what's happened in the economy, we should have grown by about 6%. But in the past 2 months, we've had so much fun. So, I mean, let's see, we've been playing Tariff Chicken now since about February to see who's going to duck. It may be panning out for the better. I'm hopeful. Then, of course, we had the question about, were we starting World War III? And everybody's Facebook feed and Instagram feed was telling you where you might survive in the event of a nuclear war. That's been really positive and optimistic in the last 2 months. And then now, of course, this week we are still in the middle of debating a big, beautiful bill and what that means for Americans, and particularly for a lot of the Americans who are in blue collar jobs and get placed by many of the people listening in today. What's this going to mean for their work? What's this going to mean for their household income? What's it going to mean with more enforcement of immigration issues for your clients? And I think it was, as I just said, it was about another 10% down year over year. So all I could think about is, who's having fun yet? This has just been like a great time to be watching the news and thinking about all of the positive views of the future and nothing but optimism. I didn't even put on the screen. I violated the rule of every presenter in 2025. There's no AI listed on there, and AI taking our jobs, but we might get to that as well. All right, so the good news is the people you see on screen, by and large, are a pretty optimistic bunch. So, guys, we're going to jump in just a minute, but I wanted to just kind of recap some of the things we said last time. So this is the world's fastest recap of our webinar. Mark said, yeah, you can create demand sometimes if you target the right segment of the market. And I think Mark was our pessimist in the group last time. Tom said, I got to move my little finger. Look at your most loyal clients. You've already created demand there. You know how to create demand by working with your clients. And Dan said, well, yeah, you can't create demand generically for staffing services overall, but yes, you absolutely can for your services if you have a clear value proposition and ideal client profile. And I chimed in with it's about the use cases and to stop selling staffing, which is the commodity, and start solving problems. So our last recap slide was just some advice from last time. Increase your focus. Know your value to your ideal clients to build a compelling value proposition. Differentiate your sales process so you don't sound like everybody else. Speak the buyer's language and be ready to deal with multiple kinds of staffing buyers. To sell strategically and solve problems. Sell what your people do, not the people. Role play like crazy and score every interaction so your people know how to get better. And systematize your process, mixing sales, marketing, and education to stay top of mind. All right, guys, that was my 4-minute recap of the last hour. If you did miss the first webinar and want to listen to it and get the full insights that this amazing panel offered, you can always go to lunchwithhaley.com, go to the webinars on demand section, and look for any of the past events. But I'm going to turn off my sharing, and we're going to just kind of jump in with a set of new questions. And while I'm doing, for those who may not know you guys, Tom, why don't you just give a quick introduction, and then we'll do Mark, and then we'll do Dan.
Sure. I'm Tom Erb with Talent Resources. We do training and consulting for the staffing and recruiting industry. I've been doing that for over 15 years. And then before that, I was in the staffing industry, working for two of the largest staffing companies for another almost 16 years. So add it all up, it's been over 30 years.
And we're not adding it all up. All right.
I had an abacus out.
That's
All
what we
right,
started
Mark.
using 30 years ago. Yeah.
How about you?
So Mark Winter, I'm with WinSource Group. We provide training, coaching, consulting, predominantly for the staffing industry, all sales all the time. So our swim lane is sales. I've been in staffing since BlackBerries were cool, and let's see, we've been doing consulting since 2019. And David, real quick, I just want to say on your opening there, there's a gentleman out there in the market, Danny Cahill, he's famous for doing a lot of recruiting and training.
Yeah.
He is part of the Pinnacle Society, which are some of the best recruiters in the world. One of the things that he talks about all the time is the one thing that all of the people that are in that Pinnacle Society have in common is they all cut their teeth in staffing during a downturn, 2002, 2008, 19, 20. That's the one thing they have in common. So anybody that's out there that's thinking to themselves, man, this is a tough time. This is the crucible. This is where we thin the herd. The strong will make it through this and will be better for it. So FYI.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And Dan,
Yep.
how about you?
Yeah, Dan Morey, founder with Staffing Mastery, and we offer strategic and tactical advisory services to staffing owners and staffing leaders in this industry. I've been doing this for 2 decades as an owner operator with a staffing agency independently owned, and we scaled to top 2% of independently owned agencies in the country. So I cut my teeth through some pretty tough times, like Mark was just mentioning. And I think that, if you can go through those times, then yeah, you can make it in any time, really. And one of the biggest things that we're most excited about now is the release of Staffing Dashboard, which is our dynamic forecasting tool that uses AI to measure performance and kind of give you a pretty solid indicator of where your year might be headed.
No, fantastic. I don't know if we're gonna have time to talk about them more, but I definitely want to hear more. All right, thanks, guys, for the intro. So, just so that everybody knows, this is beyond unscripted. No one here has even seen the questions that are about to be thrown out. Some of them were questions we didn't have time to get to during our May webinar. Some of them were questions that were submitted by people in the audience during the last presentation. And if you do have questions today, I'm going to ask you to please avoid the chat and use the Q&A box, because the Q&A box I can keep up on the screen next to us while we're talking. I don't see the chat, so I might miss your questions. All right, so we're going to start with a really basic question, which kind of fits what I think a lot of people are struggling with, but is cold calling dead?
I'll jump in and take this one. So cold calling as we knew it is, but cold calling in general is not. And here's what I mean by that. So the conversion rates have dropped to an abysmal level, right? And we've gotten to a point in my experience and my observations that you no longer can just say make more dials or make more calls, right? Because now you're going to run into time constraints of being able to get all the work done and then hopefully manage a sales process. What I'm actually seeing is you can still improve conversion rates on a true cold call with proper scripting, better targeting, all that kind of stuff. But if you actually do more marketing, more social selling, and more branding on the front end to create demand and kind of create brand reputation around that, we are seeing a significant uptick with the conversion rates from cold calls. So cold calls, the way we used to do them, they don't work as well. But if you actually modify it slightly, then they're not dead. You can still get meetings out of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed. Mark or Tom, you want to chime in on this one?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I like what Dan said. It's different than it used to be. It's not dead. You know how many people are buying things, services out there after the first time they heard about it? That's a great way to reach out to people and talk to people and introduce your services. And the opportunity for conversion is still there, but undoubtedly cold calling's gotten harder. It's harder. You gotta plan for it. You gotta be on the top of your game. You gotta say the right things, do the right things, hit the right list. So it's not the same as it was. I like that, Dan.
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but yeah, it's no, it's not dead. And it's I agree with everything that the other guy said, and I would just add, it's most people approach cold calling the wrong way. They approach it very much as a tactical one-time event.
Yeah.
But if you really think about what's going on, we know because we track the data across our clients and their sales teams is that we have about a 25-to-1 call to connect rate. And so if you make 200 calls in a week, which by the way, most salespeople don't get anywhere near, but let's say you do make 200 a week, you're going to talk to about 8 people. And everybody goes, well, that's horrible. I'm only going to talk to 8 people. Well, yeah, but you multiply that 8 times 50 weeks, give yourself 2 weeks off for vacation. You just talked to 400 decision makers. I'm talking about, if we're talking to 8 a week, we're talking to 8 people that we reached out to talk to, not not a executive assistant, not a receptionist, if there are any of those anymore, but we're actually talking to the person that we wanted to talk to that fit our ideal client profile, like Dan talked about in the last session. That's 8 times 50. That's 400. Now you're really starting to dig into your base of prospects. And it's what you do after that call, but it's also what you do during that call too, because most sales reps are absolutely horrible. When they do get somebody on the phone, they have no idea what they're going to say. And so we have to make the most of that call. And then it's all about what we do after that and how we're whittling away at the entire universe that we have in that market as far as prospects go. So to me, it's still what other way are you going to reach out to people? Email, they're getting 500 emails a day and they're not looking at them. What's the other way that we're reaching out to them? I mean, there's other ways like networking and those types of things, but there's still nothing as effective as the cold call for right now. And I don't see it changing.
Thanks, guys.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? Because there's one misnomer, and I caught this yesterday. I was on a session with the Staffing Shark, and we talked about your cadence system, Tom. And while you're saying a 25-to-1 connect ratio, but you're not connecting with every targeted prospect on the first call, right? So do you have any sense of how many calls it takes to the same prospect before they actually get that connect?
25.
So they got to call the same person 25 times to get.
Well, it's a 25-to-1, right?
Okay. So yes, that's the aggregate. Okay.
Well, no, I mean, seriously, we have about a 25-to-1 connect rate on average, but that varies. That can vary significantly. We've seen it in the teens. We've seen it in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and then we know we've got a problem. One of the big problems that people are having out there is that their phone number is getting picked up as telemarketer or spam. Yeah. And so they're going from that 25-to-1 to 75 or 100-to-1. And so we immediately, that's why it's also good to track calls to connects, because you can diagnose really quickly if something's wrong there. If you're not paying attention to that you can't. But I mean, what we're really trying to do with our process, which is 15 touches now, and of course we have other ones, they can go into other cadences after that. But in that 15 touch, we're really trying to connect with 80 to 90% of the people, either by phone or they respond to an email, one of those methods. So.
And I think just to drive that point home, the way that Tom's getting that 89% piece is because he's hyper targeted. So he knows exactly who he's calling and why he's calling him. And so he's prepared to what to say. And he's touching them multiple times, through multiple channels. And that's really what it takes today to get that level of success.
And you're not randomly talking about different stuff, or you're not just saying the same thing over again. Hi, just checking in. Hi, just checking in. Hi, just checking in. You're having messaging that does build up over time. That's the important piece. It goes back to what we all talked about on the last call around the having the ideal client profile. So going after the right people in the first place. And then second, having messaging that's more likely to resonate with them and more likely to get you to stand out over all the other people that are reaching out. So, yeah.
And that word, Tom, random, you struck something with me there. I mean, it's cold call means cold to them, not cold to us. So, I mean, you can't just grab a random list with a random script and expect targeted results, right? Random actions will get you random results. If you've got a targeted list, targeted approach, thoughtful, prepped, then you're going to get better results.
Yeah,
One of
and
the
I
things,
would
guys,
say,
I was going to jump
yeah,
in
go
and
ahead.
add to this is because Dan actually hit on one of the other questions on our initial list, which is what marketing process works best for demand generation. So I was going to jump in and take that, but Dan sort of is alluding to it already. The best marketing process is an integrated direct marketing approach,
Yeah.
where you don't know how someone's going to respond. So Tom might respond to a cold call, Mark might respond to an email, and Dan might connect with me on social or any variation thereof.
Right.
I don't know how prospect A and prospect B are going to respond. So I need to reach out to people through multiple channels. And as Tom and Dan both alluded to, I need to have something to talk about that fits what that person is interested in. I have to have done my homework, as Mark just said, so it's not a random conversation. I need to be putting something in front of them that piques their curiosity so they want to talk to me. And then I got to deal with their business issues in their language. So the best marketing process integrates all of those touches into a structured process. So the salespeople, it's really clear. Here's who we're going after. That's our ideal client, as you guys said. Here's the steps we go through. It's a documented process. Here's the things we do. And when we do pick up the phone, these are the kinds of things. It doesn't have to be a script, and it should never be a like read from the chart. But here's the kinds of things we should be trying to ask about. They're going to stimulate a decent conversation or maximize the probability of a callback. And when we do these things through, as Tom said, 15 touches, there's a lot of marketers now who will tell you it's as many as 40 or 50 touches that are required in a B2B sales process. But we take people through this cycle, then eventually we get hold of them. And Tom, it's interesting that you have found the 1 in 25, because the number we've always used in looking at direct marketing campaigns is shoot for a 4% conversion rate, which is 1 out of 25.
Yeah.
We've used that for years. All right, so I want to come to the next question, which is something everybody's hearing. So when you call on the prospect, you get through and you hear the "we're not hiring" or "we don't use staffing agencies." How do you create demand?
Well, first of all, you tell them they're a liar, right? You call them out. No. But I will tell you that they are probably lying. I mean, it's, if you've done your homework and I'm not talking about extensive homework. I'm not talking about researching for 30 minutes on every prospect you got. But if they fit your ideal client profile, as far as the type of industry that they're in, the level of the person that's there, we find that, a good 75, 80% of the time they are giving a little white lie or a bold-faced lie to get you off of the phone, or they're twisting the truth a little bit. Yeah, it's kind of a half truth, right? But it is the easiest way to get a salesperson off the phone, which is what they're trying to do. And so, so that's the first thing that you have to think about is go, okay, why wouldn't this person be doing that? And oftentimes that's a good way to initiate that is to be able to go, oh, okay, well, that's interesting to hear. We specialize in this particular profession or skill set or whatever, and that's actually an unusual strategy. Most companies of your size and type actually do leverage staffing as part of their overall talent strategy. Can you tell me why you've decided to go that route? Get them to talk a little bit about it, and have a chance to bring down their defenses and open up a discussion with them.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's going on, and Tom, to your point about hey, we don't use staffing. I don't. Sometimes they're lying, but for me that's indicative that they already have a plan. I mean, here's the thing: they didn't start the business yesterday. If they put an ad out there, so let's assume they put something on Indeed for a position. They had a plan when they put that ad out there. They had some mechanism that they thought they were going to hire through. Now the plan might suck, or the plan might not work, or the plan might not get them people fast enough. But everyone we talk to out there already believes they have a plan. So when they say, hey, we don't use staffing, or they say we don't have any needs right now, what they're really saying is, I think we already have a plan. And so way better for us to go in assuming they already have some plan for today and talk to them about what's next. One of the questions that I hate, and I don't remember if I mentioned it on this last webinar, but I hate when people go in and say, "Do you use staffing?" It doesn't matter if they do. It doesn't matter how they answer that question because you're still going to pursue it. You're way better off saying, "Hey, I'm here to talk to you about some upcoming mission critical roles. Like, what's next? What's on the horizon?" Try to tap into that stuff that they don't have the plan for yet, rather than trying to catch up, because I have to assume they already think they know what they're doing.
And I obviously agree with Tom and Mark, and a couple things I would add is going back to being hyper focused and targeted right now, which also plays into the Thomas Mueller's, hopefully I'm not mispronouncing your name, question or comment that he put out there about how if we go too big with email, we can kind of get flagged a little bit as spam. If we're getting more hyper targeted in our prospecting approach and we actually are targeting fewer prospects but better, there's a good chance that we've already pre-qualified them because, as Mark said earlier, they're not cold to us. We might know that they're actually hiring based on their job board activity or recruiting activity that we've seen out there online or other places. We also probably should all be doing our competitive research to see if they are using our competition, just to see. And if we know that they are, or we know that they're recruiting and someone says, "Oh, we're not hiring right now," you can actually call them on it in a tactful way. You can say, "Oh, I actually was calling because I saw this position listed online," and maybe go into skill marketing if, is a technique you could get to. And, have you filled this position? Is this important? So on and so forth. Or if they're like, "We don't use agencies," and you really want to get into that, there's a good chance that if you're doing targeted prospecting, you're probably calling similar type companies. And if you are, it is okay to say, "That's interesting." Kind of to Tom's point earlier when he's like, most companies are using us or agencies, and it's interesting that you're going the other way. You could say something, "Well, I actually work with a lot of companies like you that even though there's turbulent times, they're actually gearing up with their hiring right now. So I assumed that you would be too. I'm kind of shocked that are you seeing the market differently where you think it's better to hold and not hire people, or maybe things are financially worse for you, and put them in sort of a contrarian standpoint." Those are techniques I like to do to kind of throw people off because most salespeople probably aren't going to go in that contrarian path, and it's a bit of a pattern interrupt. So, and then once you do that, once you break the pattern of "No, I'm okay, I'm all set, go away, salesperson," you're more likely to get them to open up and have a real conversation.
Yeah,
The other opportunity that you have here is when they're saying that they don't use, it could be, or they don't have a need for staffing. The other alternative to that you hear a lot right now is we've brought it all back in-house.
Yeah,
and
just came up.
That is when we have an opportunity to be consultative with them and go, we are seeing that happen more and more companies. We're seeing that it's a softer labor market. There are more people out there that are available. But let me tell you what we're seeing that's right out there as soon as this turns. And then you can start to talk to them about all of the labor data about the talent shortages that we have in different industries. You can get specific to what you specialize in. You can get specific to the market that you're in. You can share all sorts of data. Lightcast, for instance, has several different great ebooks that talk about this. Ron Hetrick is the author of those. Fantastic data that really shows that this is a temporary thing, no pun intended. And you might be able to fill these jobs right now, but you need to have a strategy moving forward because this is not going to last. And if we can do that, then all of a sudden you would talk about creating demand. Now we're talking consultatively. Now we're talking about something that might pique their interest, especially the more strategic that prospect is, the more likely it's going to perk up their ears. And then you follow up with that information. "Hey, here's what I was referencing. You should check this out."
Yeah, I was going to chime in with the when if someone says we're not hiring and we don't use staffing agencies, I feel like if that's the response I have, I've asked the wrong question. Because if I'm only asking a staffing question, I put myself in the box of looking like all of my competitors. If I was, for example, into a manufacturing company and I'm selling lean manufacturing solutions, I'm not asking about staffing, even though staffing is going to play a big role in how efficient a business is. So when a company says we're not hiring, we don't use staffing, I would think, did I ask the right question for the person I'm trying to reach to make them want to talk with me? And if they're giving me a staffing related answer, it probably means I asked a staffing specific question. And John, to your question about somebody who's got a great in-house team, we don't use staffing agencies. I would be really curious, and I guess I would go in with that beginner's mindset of just asking lots of questions about what role do they play? Where are they best? Where do they struggle? How do they help you plan for the future? Are they doing workforce planning or are they mostly filling orders? Is it a staffing function or is it a higher level function? I may or may not get answers to those questions, but the more I can diagnose what's going on in the business function, most likely that talent acquisition team came out of human resources and didn't come out of operations, where you might be able to, as a staffing partner, be able to go in and say, I can find new solutions to problems the business is having that aren't just hiring solutions, that are more talent management solutions. So great questions. And
Yeah.
again, please keep them coming in. I also want
I
to
have-
follow up because Thomas did ask that question about, and then the full note was that long email sequences can get you in a lot of trouble, because they'll get you essentially flagged as a spammer, and never do email sequences, long email sequences from your company domain. Thomas could not agree more. If you're going to be doing any sort of bulk emailing, it should never be on your company's domain, because if for any reason that got blacklisted, now you can't get your regular email to people. So you should always be using a third party for sequences. But the other thing I would recommend is there are more and more tools in the market that can effectively personalize emails so that no two emails are the same, and that the cadence between when emails go out is staggered, so it mimics the look and sound of humans. And that will really reduce the chances of your sequences ever appearing to be automated and you're being blocked. And then the other part of your part, the other point that you made is they shouldn't be 15 email steps. I think we all agree that a really good outbound sequence is email and some LinkedIn outreach and picking up the phone. So the 15 touches are not 15 emails.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead,
David,
Dan.
I want to circle back to something too, because that John mentioned really quickly. And if you do hear that about, we have an incredible talent acquisition team and we don't use staffing agencies, David covered a great set of questions you can ask to start doing some diagnosis. But I think it's really important to ask yourself, why would they do that? Why would they choose not to use a professional recruiting firm to solve a challenge that we're well equipped to solve? Why would they choose to do it themselves? And a lot of the market has shifted that way. And the reason that that's happened is because our client, the marketplace, is no longer valuing the service we provide the way that they used to, right? Anytime you're going to sell a service, you have to provide value. That service has to be cheaper than they can do it themselves. It has to be faster, more convenient than they can do it themselves, or it has to provide a higher quality than they can do it themselves. If you can't check at least one of those boxes, it makes more sense for them to bring it in-house. And we're in a structural shift in our industry right now that's causing us to have to actually go back out and actually push the industry forward, right? Our clients have caught up to our capabilities. So right now we've been doing nothing more than they can do themselves pretty easily. So if you want to get past that, you have to actually share with them what their talent acquisition team is doing, and maybe what you're doing that's actually different, leveraging all of the new tools, the automations, the workflows, access to passive talent, all those things that maybe their inside talent team isn't doing or doesn't have the capabilities, to showcase that what you can bring to the table can either provide better quality, do it faster, more conveniently, or maybe do it less expensively than they're doing it. So you just have to reinvent your value prop, and that's most likely why they've brought it in-house, is because that's just not, they don't see the value in what we do anymore.
Excellent.
I think too, Dan, that we've made staffing look real easy to our customers and prospects. We make it look easy, and we're not good at bragging about the hard work that we do. So this question is a reminder to me that your current customers, go tell them how hard you're working on their behalf. Show them the work you're doing, because sometimes we're a little we don't want to thump our chest too much, but it makes it look really easy, and they believe they can do it themselves. So pat yourself on the back, make sure you're bragging about the work you're doing, and make sure your customers know how hard you're working on their behalf.
There was also a comment just left in the chat. Thank you, Rachel, for sharing it, that very often that when there is a good in-house team, HR loves them, but sometimes the hiring managers do not, because they may not be really good at communicating with those hiring managers, because the people in HR may not speak the language of the end user of the staffing services, and you have an opportunity to work directly with them when you can speak their language. All right, guys, one more question that is a carryover, and then we're going to get to questions from the audience. This is one we touched on last time, but I want to hit it again, which is there's such a big opportunity with existing clients. So how can you create demand with your current clients?
Tom, that was your quote, so you got to lead off here.
I don't remember what I said. Um, I think that I talk to a lot of my clients about this. One of the best exercises you can do is to really evaluate what your current relationship is with each of your contacts at companies. Give them an A through an F rating. A is trusted advisor, F is necessary evil, and C is vendor. And be honest with yourself. Where do I start out with each of them? And also take a look and go, okay, do I have relationships at all the different areas and levels that I need to have relationships with? Because that one area that I don't have a relationship with is ultimately the one that's going to come back to bite me. So take a look at that and you say, okay, right now I'd say that we're a solid C. We're a vendor to them, but we're a pretty good vendor to them. What am I going to do strategically? What am I going to do to build that relationship? And when you start to have those conversations with them, you're trying to elevate that relationship, and then all of a sudden there's more business that will come your way. You do have to ask them for the business too, but you have to ask them once you get to a point where you have the credibility to be able to ask them for it. So that's how I would approach it. The other thing I would say too is that our industry has never really recovered from COVID as far as getting out and getting in front of our clients at the level we used to. We used to go to lunch with them all the time. We used to bring them coffee. We used to go golfing with them. We used to do all sorts of different things to develop these relationships. And some of that's going on, but a lot of it's not. And a lot of times I'm talking to clients that look at that, they go, I wouldn't even think to do that. Can I really go out to lunch with them? Would they really do that? And there's an opportunity there to kind of fill a void because your competitors aren't doing it either. And so if you are doing it, great, do more of it and more of it and more of it. But if you're not doing it, you need to start to put yourself outside of your comfort zone and start to ask them.
Yeah. I got 3 quick hit tactics. This is just straight tactical stuff you can deploy. The first one is, to Tom said, you got to ask for the business. Literally train every single person in your organization to ask for more orders. Are there anything else I can help with? It literally is the would you like fries with that moment that catapulted McDonald's, right? Your people should be doing that. It costs you nothing. It is easy to do, and you can train them to become a habit in saying it, and you will get more business. The second tactic is something I call you, me, us. This is a great primer conversation. I used to do this all the time in the field when visiting clients, typically once a year, maybe quarterly, but typically this would be good for good strategies with them. I literally would take a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, turn it sideways, landscape, and put 2 lines on it to create 3 columns. I'd label them you on the left side, me on the right side, and us in the middle. And I just say, hey, what are some of the key strategic initiatives that you're trying to accomplish this year? And can I share with you some of mine? And I would list theirs on their side and list mine on my side, and we have a conversation, and I would look for synergies and say, hey, I see that you're trying to improve your workplace safety program. I see that you're trying to improve attendance. I see that you're trying to do these things. So aren't we? Can we work together on those? Right? And that's an area that you can integrate and help bring your expertise to them, maybe even share resources to help achieve one of their key objectives that's not even staffing related, but it makes you more of a partner and gets you, more away from the F grade that Tom gave you up to the A grade. So that's another tactic, the you, me, us. And if you're not doing QBRs, do QBRs, at least for your A and B tier clients. You should really be meeting with them on a regular basis and having these conversations. And when you show up, don't always make it just about the review. Tee up some questions like David was talking about earlier and say, hey, with these tariffs going on, how is that going to affect your business? Yeah. Are we going to need to be getting out in front of hiring? Are you bringing more manufacturing onshore and we need to get out in front and get the good people before your competition does? Or is this going to crush your business and maybe we need to be thinking about a stability play or something else, right? Be asking really good questions that are insightful about their business and just package it in a QBR, add it to the action items that you are going to collaborate on over the next quarter, and then review that at your next QBR. So those are 3 things that you can absolutely do that will drive demand with your current clients.
Yeah, Dan, one of the things you're talking about with existing clients, and you mentioned the word skill marketing, but that's actually an ideal place to start because those are the most likely buyers to appreciate, hey, I've got some amazing talent, and before I stick them into our database, you hire people like this all the time. Do you
Yeah.
want to see the resume before I put them into the system? Now you're making your client feel special and giving them first access to your best talent, so it's a win-win relationship. The other tactic I was going to recommend is build an org chart of your client's organization and start coloring the boxes. People that I know and have a great relationship, they're green. People that I should know and have no relationship, they're red. I got to build those. And the ones in the middle are yellow. And so you start to map out, where do we have relationships and where don't we? And now you know where to work, either to strengthen the places you have relationships or to start to forge them where you don't. All right, guys, let's shift over to some questions from the audience.
Hey, Connie,
And
David, Connie, really quickly for clarity's sake, and I use an acronym. Connie, good to see you on here. Hopefully that Cole announcement is going to do some good for you. But QBR is quarterly business review. It's just basically reviewing the performance of your organization against the key goals that you share with your client and learning about their business. But quarterly business review is what that is.
all right, thanks, Dan. So first question that came in from the audience is, in a competitive market, how can staffing companies differentiate themselves in the eyes of clients who view temporary staffing as a commodity?
Focus on process. I mean, that's where it starts. Your processes are what differentiate you. Now, we look at the big bucket processes, sales, recruiting, operations, but you start to get in and you start to think about how good your team is at recruiting, how good your team is at interviewing, how fast your team is at getting candidates through the pipeline and ready to work. Those are all competitive differentiators. Being able to articulate them and share them with prospects is that's something the sales team needs to be ready for. Every staffing company I've worked with, if we sit down with a whiteboard or a couple sheets of paper, we can come up with a dozen or more competitive differentiators that tie back to some kind of process internally. And it's great because it's safe, it's doesn't depend on people, it's something that businesses can relate to. I'd start with process.
Awesome. Tom or Dan, how would you differentiate?
I tie it to the value prop. Kind of same thing what Mark was just saying, but your process and what you do is part of your value prop, and the outcome of that process is going to directly align with the value proposition that you want to be known for as a company, whether you want to be the fastest, most convenient provider, the best quality talent provider, which typically means maybe a little slower, maybe a little bit, more expensive. Or maybe you just want to be the cheapest agency, but you're going to look at your process, the way that you're built, the way that you operate to deliver the end goal for your client. You're going to know exactly how that connects to the challenges and the desired outcomes of your ideal client profile. And then in that vein right there, you should have all of your talk tracks, all of your kind of train your salespeople to know exactly what symptoms they should be looking for in those conversations and know exactly how to connect those symptoms to real business challenges and how to connect it back to the valuable process that you provide and that desired outcome. And that's really about questioning and how you position those answers to your prospects.
Yeah, and I would say positioning, Dan, is a key word, because often when we sell, we position things based on our lens, our language. So we go in and we say, hey, we have this great process, we have this great value driver. And we say it in our words. We have to put it in their words. We have to say, this is the thing that's going to reduce injuries. This is the thing that's going to save you money. This is the thing that's going to speed up time to productivity. We've got to put it in their language, and that's definitely a positioning thing that we've got to get better at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're looked at as a commodity because most staffing companies don't really give any kind of thought as to what to do different. They're posting jobs on Indeed. They're processing them manually. They are not paying attention to their database. They are not training their internal team to get any better. And in most cases, they're bringing them in and just having them start recruiting and submitting candidates within a few days. They don't even understand basic employment law. I could go on and on and on. And it all goes to, those are commodity plays. Like, what's your onboarding process for a new client? Most staffing companies goes, what do you mean? Well, we send an email and say somebody's going to get in touch with you. Well, that's a commodity. Everything that we do is a commodity play. We are we are treated as a commodity because we act like a commodity all day, every day. And I would say that that is 98% of the staffing industry. If you got 28,000 staffing companies out there, 27,000 plus of them are acting that way all the time. And they'll have little different things. But a lot of times it also is kind of luck. Well, you know, we have really good internal employees. Oh, really? Tell me about how you recruited them. I just picked the ones I liked. And we've had a bunch turnover, and I finally got some good ones in here. There's no strategy to it at all. So we start with just being purposeful. Start with coming up and saying, what is it that everybody else does the same, which it's not hard to see. It's not hard to see at all.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing to take a look at too, you know, it's all, Mark was talking about process, and I absolutely agree, because process is consistent. People come and go, technology come and go. But you do look at all three of them, people, process, and technology is the big one right now. It's like, how do I blend these things? How do I take this AI and automation and all the other technologies here, and how do I, you know, build a better mousetrap? But right now, everybody's just going with the same old mousetrap from hundreds of years ago. So
I also, there's one other thing too that I think is really important for differentiation, right? Because a lot of times we're human beings. We buy very human ways, right? And we like social proof. We want to, no one wants to be sold. No one wants to make a bad buying decision. So we want to go out there and see, did someone else buy this service and have a good experience with it? We do it in our everyday lives. When we look at Yelp reviews, Facebook reviews, Google reviews, you know, all that stuff. And maybe even look at your Uber driver's rating. It's like, do I want to get in a guy that's 4.97? I don't know. You know, it's like we do that. We're such a review centric society that most staffing agencies, I don't think they leverage reviews or client testimonials nearly enough. And again, you can actually use that as a great opportunity to get a lot of good reviews, right? And then if your client or prospect asks you, like, why are you different? Or you're just like everybody else, be like, you know, wouldn't you want to work with the agency that actually has the best access to talent and that talent would work with them? Go look at us. Don't take my word for it. Go look at our reviews. We've got 50,000 reviews and we're 4.7 star rated. Everyone else you're talking to has 6 reviews and it's 5 stars. That's a little suspect. Who do you think is going to do a better job getting you talent? You know, so it's social proof. And those are things that, again, you can use tools like Great Recruiters. And I'm sure David's got a whole list of tools that you can use for stuff like that. But man, reviews you can actually do yourself in-house as well, and do a great job with it. And it gives you social proof to differentiate yourself earlier in the stream. It creates that brand reputation that will help you sell downstream easier.
So guys, I may have missed this because I was typing an answer to someone on one of the inbound questions, but one of the things I don't think I heard so far is that one of the best ways to differentiate is to increase your focus. So the more I'm tightly focused on a specific type of staffing buyer, whether that's a vertical market, whether that's a job title, whether that's roles I fill, the easier it is to understand my value to that buyer, the easier it is to stand out, because I'm going to ask better questions in the sales process. I'm going to be able to talk at a deeper level about the problems and issues that my client is facing. And I'm going to be able to provide talent that I know is the right fit. And what I see is, especially in a down market, we try to create demand by going broader, doing more things, trying to go after more businesses, looking for anybody who's willing to buy. But the wider we go, the more we dilute our expertise.
absolutely.
And if we increase our focus, we increase our differentiation. And then, as Dan likes to say, and Dan, I steal this from you all the time, is, you know, we really have to differentiate the sales process, not the service delivery. Because if the experience of buying from you looks like the experience of everybody else, people are assuming the service delivery is going to be the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can use that royalty free, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So another, I'm kind of bouncing around on questions here, but this is an interesting one. Share some practical strategies to get listed as a staffing agency for very large accounts. So a lot of people listening in today are probably with small to mid-sized staffing companies, and they want to go after big accounts. So how do you get to be an approved agency on a big account to create demand that way? And I guess the corollary, is that even a good strategy?
So I've got thoughts. So you had it right hand. Is that a good strategy? First and foremost, you really have to ask yourself, you know, is the juice worth the squeeze at that point? You know, it's not all it's cracked up for, but if you're built to service enterprise level and large scale employers, if that's what you're built for and you can deliver value there, then you should go after it. I will tell you a statistic that I've heard the last couple of years from SIA and different conferences is that 80% of the enterprise buyer market for staffing services uses an MSP. So unfortunately, if you really want to get into their program, they're more sophisticated buyers. It's a longer sales cycle, and you most likely will have to do one of two things: sell to and eventually through an MSP and get on their staffing program that way, or really ramp up your SOW or statement of work business and try to sell around the MSP for some carve out business where they might be able to give you very specific project work direct to you. But unfortunately, if you're going to go after the big enterprise customers, you're probably going to end up dealing with an MSP at this point. And that's my thought. But David's spot on. You really need to consider if that's what you're built for before you even pursue it, because it's a lot more involved than you might realize.
So I think going through MSPs or VMS, yeah, that's a great way to knock on the door of some of these big companies. Here's the number one strategy for getting in the biggest companies: drop your price. That's what happens. You go out there and you hit a procurement team, and they're going to say, sharpen your pencil. And then you're going to go back and whine to your boss about, oh, we can't compete on price. I don't understand. We're higher than everybody. Well, stop going to those prospects. Stop, well, unless that's your strategy. I mean, if you're going to take on the strategy of these big enterprise accounts, understand that that level of volume comes at a price, and be willing to pay the price, or don't play that game.
Yeah, it's a much bigger discussion around this as far as the strategy of whether you want to do it. But if you say that, yeah, I do want to go after some of that, I believe the 80% MSP number is probably too low. It seems like it's probably higher than
You're
that,
right.
but it's certainly very, very high. Your odds are you're going to be going through an MSP, VMS. So one of the best strategies you can have, first of all, is do you fit into a set aside classification where you are a disadvantaged business enterprise, whether that is minority owned business, women owned business, veteran, disabled veteran. So there's some different things in there that's going to give you a chance to get in there maybe from a different angle. And if you have that, then I'm going to go to a director level or higher in their diversity purchasing. So if they're large enough, they're going to have a purchasing diversity person, and you can go and find that person. A lot of times they'll talk with you. The other thing that you can do is just try and get into just one of these MSPs. And then once you get in there and prove yourself a little bit, get in good with that program manager or director or whoever's running it, go at level or two higher and try and go into other of the companies that they service. If you're doing a good job and you're flexible and you maybe are providing them with a skill set, a specialization that not everybody wants to go after, or you're willing to work on some of the tougher jobs that people don't tend to touch, then they're going to find more value in you and be more likely to take you around. I've seen staffing companies go from being $2 or $3 million up to being 30, 40, 50 million.
Yeah.
Because one of the MSPs found a lot of value in them and took them around everywhere, which then opened them up to new markets. And they had these seed accounts. Well, now I've got a good size account here. I can open an office in this area and start to sell in this area. So it again, could be an hour-long session in itself. But that's how I would go about it. One other thing is, if you don't fall into one of those set aside disadvantaged business enterprises, you can still specialize in something that is of value to them. And that can either be certain types of skill sets that not a lot of people focus on, or it can also be different types of service offerings. So you can look at more like an RPO. You can look at statement of work instead of just your traditional contract staffing. So there's different ways to approach that.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to say is, if you're really going to go after the large volume buyer, it's almost a different business. You're
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
longer a traditional staffing business. You're basically in the fulfillment business, and you have to restructure your company to focus only on delivery, take all of your costs out of selling, and then you have to be really good at getting efficient.
And
All
really
right, guys, we got
fast.
about 10 minutes left, so I want to get to a couple more of these. We just talked about the large market, but then there was a question that came in of how do you define what a quote unquote B market is, and how do you find these B market size companies and go after them?
So I'll lead off there. And I'm not going to go backwards, but I'm going to put something in chat because there's 3 things about selling MSPs I think people should be aware of if they get in. So I'm going to put it in chat. So go look there. But I was the one that made the comment about A, B, and C. For me, it's like grading on a curve. What might be an A type client for me might actually be a B or a C for Mark or Tom, right? So what I look at it is how big is the biggest client that you're equipped to provide value to, that you're really equipped to provide great service to, and maybe it is a 10-person account, and maybe that's your A. And maybe a B might be someone that has 2 to 4 temps on, and maybe a C is a onesie twosie account. Maybe that's where you're at. But as you scale and evolve in this business, you might be built to actually take on and service people where you have hundreds of temporary employees or contractors on at one client, and that's now your A. And maybe a B is someone that has 50 to 80, and a C is someone that has, more than 20. So like you will evolve, and I encourage people to really define that based on what you're equipped to standard and not use these kind of industry standards for that. But really, once you have that, and I think this is going to answer someone's questions that maybe you already answered, David. Once you know what that means for you and you define it, then you just go do research. You actually jump into LinkedIn, the internet, Google, some very free ones. ChatGPT, the deep research on ChatGPT is really good at this stuff now, actually. So you could actually start there. If you have tools like ZoomInfo or Seamless or Sourcewell has this capability now, Apollo, things like that, you can go in there and put all your filters for the size of companies that match what is a B client for you or a mid-market client for you or an A, and then it will actually segment that out for you. And you can do it in Sales Navigator and LinkedIn and things like that as well. But just any of those tools will help you actually give you a list based on your ICP, ideal client profile.
Any other thoughts on how to identify the middle market, the Bs?
That's good stuff.
Just take a look at what you have success with already and look for more of those types of companies. So if you have success with particular mid-size companies in a particular industry or a particular skill set that you fill, go and look for other ones that fit that. Do SIC coach searches or like Dan was talking about, a lot of these you don't even, these Apollos and ZoomInfos and those, you don't even have to do SIC searches anymore. It's much easier to do it than that. So, but just try and replicate what you've already been good at, and then you can point to it. Hey, we've had success with this. Here's a case study on what we've done with this particular industry, and just keep building on that.
Exactly.
Okay, guys, we're going to wrap it up with 2 final questions. One is sort of related to an issue that you guys were just addressing, price. So I'm seeing a huge reduction in markups, both temp and perm. And if you're looking to create demand, yeah, you can lower your price to create demand, but really what you're looking to do is maximize your gross margins. So in this market, when there's a lot of pricing pressure, do you cave? Do you hold your rates? What should your strategy be?
Go ahead,
I
Mike.
would say hold your rates. I mean, here's the deal. Tom threw out the number: 28,000 staffing companies in the U.S. today. Not all of them are going to make it. So if the ones that aren't going to make it are the ones that are offering the lowball quote, and you're trying to compete with them, guess what? You're right behind them. It's a race to the bottom, and you're not going to recoup that money. So develop a pricing strategy that works for your market and go sell that and stick to it. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't offer something. Like, be thoughtful about your strategy. So if there's a logo you want to have, or there's a space you want to play in, or there's a company that you can steal away from a competitor, those are all great reasons to offer a price concession. But be thoughtful about it. Don't chase other people's quotes, because you could be chasing the 5,000 or 6,000 companies that aren't going to be here in a couple of years.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to lead with kind of the same thing. Should you lower your rate? The answer is only if your strategy is to provide low cost value, right? If you're built in a way that is hyper efficient, maybe you've got a really lean team, you've automated, as much as you can, and you really have a really low cost fulfillment operation to provide the service, and you can compete at a lower price and still make good margins, then yeah, go competitive, as long as you can make the margin, right? Because I mean, again, revenue, that's a vanity metric. Margin is sanity. So as long as you're built that way, then go ahead. You can chase it. But if you're not built that way, do not chase it. Do not chase it. It is not worth it. It is a race to the bottom, as Mark just said. So find out what you're built for. Be the best at that. I promise you, there are clients out there that actually look at low-cost vendors as cheap. And they will be like, just like as if you've ever looked at something and you're like, gosh, I feel like I want to pay a little bit more. I feel like I should be paying a little bit more to get better quality. There's buyers in the staffing sector just like that. You just have to go find them. So I would say build yourself for the value and go market the value that you're built for. That's how I would approach it.
Yeah, I agree with them. To me, it's a symptom of not doing enough sales, because what happens is the very first ones that will actually talk to you are the ones that are always shopping price.
Yeah.
And so when you're saying, oh, everybody that I'm talking to is just wanting a lower price, or they've gone with these lower, well, yeah, it's because those are the ones that are going to initially talk to you and throw out a price there. So to me, it's partly a sales thing. I will say real quick, because I know we have one more question to answer, and this will be an interesting take. Our margins are going to go down significantly in the next 2 years, whether we want to or not. And it's because of AI. AI is going to allow internal teams to do 3, 4, 5 times as much as they can do today, which means our internal structure for the people who figure it out is going to be much more cost effective, which is going to allow certain companies to be able to bring down their margins and still maintain their profit. So don't be dropping your rates now, because you're going to have to drop your rates later. What you really need to focus on is, how do I compete a year, 2 years from now when AI is allowing internal teams to scale? This is the most transformative change to our internal cost structure as an industry in the 30 years I've been in it, by far. For the most part, our internal cost structure is kind of the same as it was 30 years ago. That's going to change in the next 2 years. So I'll just drop that one right before we finish off.
You have to expect that as AI makes you more efficient, your customers know that. And they're going to come after you expecting you to be able to drop your bill rates because you're now more efficient in serving them. All right, guys, we have 3 minutes for the last question. And just to take about 30 seconds each. When you think about looking forward, if you had one piece of advice to help staffing companies grow in the second half of 2025, what would you suggest?
I would say get really clear about the business that you're in. If you're in the people business, go build relationships. If you're in the commodity business and the large scale volume business, make sure you're wired to go sell that. Figure out your lane and double down on the effort within that lane. Don't try to be all things to all people.
I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I just delivered this session actually with Mark at NJSA. Know who you are. What is the value that you provide? Get really clear. It's time to reset what your ICP is. Don't assume it's the same company that you were servicing when you started 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Go ask yourself and ask your clients, what are your challenges as it relates to staffing, and what's your desired outcome? And then figure out what value you provide to solve that, and document that and define it really, really clearly. And then connect the dots so you can teach every single person in your organization how your value addresses the challenges of your ideal client and delivers the desired outcome that they want. And then teach your people how to sell to that, how to identify those challenges and how to address those challenges and move them down the pipeline to being a good client that meets your criteria for good. So you're only working with your best clients, the ones that you're best equipped to service, that give you the best margins and have the best relationships. Reinvent yourself right now.
I would just say look for ways to scale your activity, your sales and marketing activity. Most companies, even though we've gone through a downturn, have not significantly increased the amount of sales activity that they actually do. Most salespeople have not increased the amount of sales activity they do. They're saying it's not working. So look for ways to be able to scale it. Look for ways to get more efficient. Almost all sales reps struggle with time management, including myself. So you got to be really focused on how do I be more efficient? How do I make the most use of my time and be more purposeful?
Thanks. And guys, I'll wrap it up for mine, which is I would really take a hard look at my business model. I agree with what Tom was talking about with AI. I think it's going to force us to reinvent what staffing looks like, where the human in the loop is, where we build relationships and where we need to automate, how we deal with the fact that employers are getting crushed with the volume of candidates applying to jobs and fake resumes and even fake interview candidates. It's just amazing what people can do with AI, but your clients need your help figuring out how to deal with that. And that's going to create opportunities for staffing companies because the value of this industry as an intermediary in finding the right person is actually increasing with the onslaught of AI, not decreasing. But we have to use AI and technology to get more efficient. And then I'll agree with everybody else here. And then more activity to find the people who care. All right, guys, I want to thank you all very much. We are right at the end of the hour. If you like this, there's the recap webinar will be at lunchwithhaley.com. We also have another event coming up in just a couple of weeks. And to save time, I'm not going to put it on the screen, just our next webinar, what the best staffing and recruiting firms do differently. We'll talk about some real world strategies to help your company grow, stand out, drive results. That's coming up on Thursday, July 17th. You can get access to that at our lunchwithhaley.com website. And from all of us, thanks, guys, for attending, giving us an hour of your time. Tom, Mark, and Dan, thank you all so much. Great advice as always.
Thanks for setting this up, David.
All right. Thanks for
See
having
you
me here,
guys.
David.
Thanks, Joe.
See y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Happy selling, folks.